Hello, players of games. I'm Mark. Chris is here.
Hello.
We're back. Sorry, I spoke over you there, mate. We're back after 7 months, and the last time we spoke to you, we were talking about the projects that we had failed. Well, there is some good news. There will be something new from Introversion this year. There's a new game coming. But I'm not going to say any more about that.
No.
Because that is not what today is about. Today is a bit of a retrospective. And would you say Darwinia is your favourite Introversion game?
Darwinia is my favourite Introversion game.
Is it? Yeah,
I have said it.
I had a feeling that you'd have a soft spot for you. Now, many of you...
Because Darwinia is the video game that I made in response to my childhood of playing games. So it's a very personal game to me.
So tell me about your childhood of playing games.
Well, my childhood of playing games started on the Spectrum, and for many years that was kind of the centre of my entire life, obviously, and then I graduated to the Amiga, and for me, so to me, Darwinia is kind of a love letter to those old computers. It's like everything I loved about those computers brought into a modern video game. And even things like the control mechanisms for the main characters and the way the Darwinians respond are all very directly based on really critical major games in the Amiga catalogue. Particularly the Amiga, I think, is probably where it all comes from the most. But the Space Invaders, the Centipedes, are all very arcadey. The Squaddies are very cannon foddery, syndicate-y. The Darwinians are very Lemmingsy. It's like I just grabbed from all my favourite parts of the Amiga and Spectrum collection, and made it into a game.
Yeah, I do. I mean, you're talking about all these things, and I'm sitting and I'm getting a wave of nostalgia because just like you, I started out on a Spectrum, and I had an Atari and an Amiga and all the rest. But I wonder how many people, we might be speaking complete gobbledygook.
Yeah.
But the reason we're talking about Darwinia today is because Darwinia is roughly 16 years old.
It is roughly 16 years old, and I think that's important because the Darwinians don't operate in decimal, obviously. They're a digital life form. They obviously are going to operate in base 2, aren't they?
They are indeed.
And so it's their 10,000th anniversary as far as they're concerned.
So here we go. Mark and Chris are going to give you a celebration of the Darwinians' 10,000th anniversary. Introversion was quite a young company. We had just released Uplink, which was not the most graphically exciting game of all time.
What are you talking about?
Okay, I didn't mean to offend your designer sensibilities.
Uplink looks exactly as it should look, I think you'll find. I know what you're saying. You're saying that we certainly felt. I felt that with Uplink, we were going to be stuck making games that look like that forever, you know. And then actually, I wanted to go to the complete other end of the spectrum, you know, which I think is quite a common theme, isn't it? I wanted to do something that just was so visually and stylistically different from Uplink that it couldn't possibly be like confused. You know, do you know what I mean?
But you smashed it as well, because PC Gamer, I think, called it the most artistically... What do they call it?
The most artistically exciting video game ever.
The most artistically exciting.
That is kind of a ridiculous statement, isn't it?
Ever. I mean, this was true. We should say 16 years ago.
No, it's true forever. You can't take.
No, you can't take it back, can you? No, PC Gamer is still.
He said forever, so no,
that's right.
He said ever.
Yes.
He didn't say ever until next month when Tomb Raider 4 comes out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But as far as we're concerned, nothing is more artistically exciting.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's important to mention. It's probably quite important to point out that quite a lot of my games are also very inspired by movies. War games is an obvious one. And I think we have to acknowledge that Tron is an obvious one as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there was kind of one Christmas when I watched Tron and War Games. You know?
Oh, that's a day, isn't it?
And I think my mind just kind of went...
Yeah.
You know, and just exploded. And I've kind of been making Tron and War Games ever since.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? I'm still there.
There's no... Words cannot describe Darwinia, so let's fire it up.
All right. How many times have we seen this?
Yeah, 10,000. 10,000, more than 16. So what is this?
So we are flying through here an abstract representation of the internet as visualized by Darwinia's rendering system.
Right, okay.
And so every one of these little nodes is a computer on the internet. And obviously when we made Darwinia, the internet was quite a lot smaller than it is now. That's my excuse. And so you can see actually there's loads of data packets building up and flowing down the lines.
Right. But this was actually accurate, wasn't it, at the time?
Yes, that's right. We did a survey, didn't we?
You did a survey. This is a one-to-one mapping of computers. So we're flying through the internet. There's nothing to tell anybody that we're flying through the internet.
No. Well, there you go. It says, welcome to the internet's first digital theme park. What more do you want?
Okay. And
then you see this computer system, which is Darwinia. This is the world of Darwinia, right? And it's, for some reason, it's like a giant glowing Tron-like sphere that we're going to fly inside. I don't really know what I was smoking when I made Darwinia. Can you remember?
I can't. I've never partaken. But I love that. I love that pan.
Yeah.
You know, I always love this.
It's because it's like it's very Tron-like, the idea of flying into a computer. You know. And it's an idea that was very prevalent in the 80s concept of what the future computers might look like. You know, you would go into a computer and you would fly around it physically, and there were a load of 90s hacking movies where they flew into cyberspace as well.
Yeah,
you know, and they would go and land where they wanted to hack or whatever. This is a virtualized world. This is a virtual world running on a giant factories full of computer systems, all simulating this world. And within this world, there are little people that live in here called the Darwinians, you know? And that's these guys.
Let's go and find them.
It's always been a really crazy looking game, hasn't it? It's always had quite a look.
It is. I do think it looks lovely.
Yeah, I do too. Well, thanks, mate.
And I think it can... Yeah, well, yeah.
Unlike all those naysayers who tell you it's a load of shit.
Well, no, I think a couple of people said it looked shit, didn't they? But
yeah, they did. Yeah, we won't name them.
No, they're not. They're poor people. Yeah. You know, not poor money. Poor
they weren't ready for Darwinia, were they? They weren't ready. I don't think the world was ready for Darwinia.
I think it stands up as well.
Yeah, and that's part of it. I mean, it's you can't say it's aged.
No.
Can you? Because it looks as it did then now, you know. It has the same look to it. It has the same atmosphere to it. It has the same feel to it. And it was never designed to look like a photoreal place. I think it's one of the reasons why I have such fond memories of it. Because it's a sort of all the games that we've made, it's kind of the most purely creative.
Right.
Like we created something from absolutely nothing. None of this makes any sense. None of it exists. None of it's really based on anything. It's just like a weird collection of things that inspired me when I was a kid.
Yeah, right.
All kind of munged together. And there's Dr. Sepulveda. So he is the scientist responsible for building this virtual simulation. And it's an experiment in virtual life. So you can see that when the Darwinians die, when they get killed, they leave behind these little glowing spirit orbs, which is kind of the Darwinian soul. And it just floats there for a little while. And eventually it'll kind of lift up and you can see they're kind of floating off into the sky.
That's right, in their little sort of lanterns, aren't they? The little spiritual
so the Darwinians,
spirit carriers.
The Darwinians have a whole mythology around this. There you go. So you can see this one's just releasing now. It's leaving the Earth, right? Bye-bye. He's had a nice little life. He probably got eaten by a spider or something. Right, and so that little soul of the Darwinian is going to float all the way up into the centre of Darwinia. And it kind of contains all of his memories, or her memories, and all of their experiences of what happened to them, right? So the fact that he was eaten by a spider is encoded in that little soul as it floats up towards the soul repository. So if we leave the location, you can actually see, we were just at the mine, a stream of Darwinian souls leaving the mine.
Right.
And there's a lot, because we've just been active in the mine, there's been a lot of death. And they're floating towards this repository at the origin, right? That's at 000.
I see.
At the centre of the sphere. And so all the souls are kind of munging together up there and mixing. And there's a lot of cross-pollination that goes on as well. Right. It's like a sort of a hybrid reincarnation, Darwinian evolution, Buddhist Christian creation myth, essentially, with Dr. Sepulveda responsible for all of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this always was your sort of. There's definite religious overtones in Darwinia, I think, but not with any agenda. Just it's just there in the background, isn't it?
It's just the world that they live in.
Yeah, sort of seasoning. Yeah.
Yeah, they live in. They've created this strange world, and they exist in it, and so their beliefs have sprung up around what's happened to them, around what they can see. And so, the mythology is part of who they are. I mean, so it's an experiment in digital life. So they're considered sentient by the time you arrive.
Right.
But this disaster has occurred. There's kind of there's been a computer virus infection, and so this is the virus. Anything that's red and evil looking, and the virus is itself based on a whole bunch of video game archetypes, all kind of munged together into one. And the virus has its own life cycle as well. So if I get rid of these guys...
So what are the influences then? I mean, what are the influences for the centipede, for instance?
Well, centipede...
I knew that.
Were you just waiting to drop that one?
I did.
Yeah, I mean, so it's quite interesting life cycle of these guys as well. So you see these little spiders, for example, they lay these little eggs.
I still hate the spiders. The way they move.
That's brilliant.
I'm a little bit arachnophobic, and they get to me.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to. There's something about the way their legs glue to the floor, isn't there, that makes them look particularly nasty. I mean, it was batshit crazy stuff for 2004.
But again,
when we were making this game. But you see there, I don't know if you noticed there, but the little viruses that are around, when they see an egg that's unfertilized, they'll actually pick up one of the fallen souls nearby and carry it into the egg and fertilize the egg. See, there you go.
Is that a Darwinian soul there?
Yeah, these are dead viruses. These are viruses
dead virus souls.
We've killed them earlier with some of our squaddies. So if you sit and watch these for long enough, these eggs will actually hatch and more virus will emerge.
Right.
So the virus can also reproduce in its own way, but it reproduces in more of a kind of like a cancerous way. It kind of absorbs what's there and multiplies.
So did Sepulveda not have any? We should talk about Sepulveda, right? Because Sepulveda, I think we've learned, is pronounced Sepulveda, isn't it?
And screw those Americans.
But it was a boulevard in LA.
That's right.
That we drove down without me, didn't we? And I remember either you or I said that would be a great Sepulveda.
Yeah.
Sounds like a villain.
Yeah, that was me.
But probably me. But Sepulveda, is he a villain?
No, he's not a villain. No, of course not. He's a genius scientist. He's sort of based on Sir Clive Sinclair, you know.
Right.
He's like an eccentric scientist. Before eccentric scientists had to become billionaires and weirdos.
Well, just before. I mean, I'm sure he wanted to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that.
The world didn't need 1,000 billionaires back then, did it? They were destitute.
Well, it's not that. It's just that the Sinclair C5 was not a Tesla.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, that's savage. Savage. No, but the Spectrum was a world-changing computer that everyone in Great Britain bought, and nobody else outside of the UK realised existed.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely.
And so the Spectrum was there's an awful lot of British video game developers will swear that the Spectrum is the reason they got into games.
Of our age, absolutely. And the history of computing is now told through the eyes of sort of Steve Jobs and the rest of it. But I feel sometimes as if when it's told that the whole British explosion is sometimes left out, you know, in the global history.
Yeah, because it was sort of a quirky corner of computing, wasn't it?
But that's all there was in those days.
Yeah,
That's all there was. We're a bunch of quirky corners of computing. It's just that, you know, IBM PC kind of won for a good while, and you know, Steve Jobs did his thing. But there were other alternatives back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sepulveda didn't want any threat in his world at all, or has the threat gotten out of control?
So the idea behind the story of the game is he's been nursing these little green Darwinians and trying to get them to grow and learn, you know, as an experiment of artificial life. So he's created this world for them to live in, and he's taken the concept of Darwinian evolution, which is like a sort of, you could say an AI growth model is based on evolution, right? You have a fitness function, don't you? We were talking about this earlier. Your fitness function determines how successful something has been in its existence, and then you kind of cull all the unsuccessful ones and throw them away, and you merge the successful ones together to get randomness, and you rinse and repeat. And if you do that for long enough, you get humans, right, ordering pizza on planet Earth. You know.
Yeah, the pinnacle of
existence, right? All the way from single-cell amoeba, right? As that entire process has been driven by fitness function. So here's the same idea, right? We're going to have these Darwinians. They're going to live in this world. They'll die, and then if they die, they'll go back up to the soul repository, and their DNA will merge, and then they'll come back down again, you know, and get another chance. And if I run this for long enough, they'll learn. And then what ended up happening is they ended up with this sort of viral infection ended up attacking the place and almost destroying it. Almost.
Right.
Right. And in the mythology of the video game, this is when you arrive, right? So you connect to this computer system at that exact moment, and you start helping Dr. Sepulveda get on top of the problem.
How?
And right, that's a good idea. That's best done with a demonstration, I think. So this is a good example of a level. I'll demonstrate some of the gameplay. So this level is covered in this kind of red virus, and there are no Darwinians to be seen. But all of the equipment here is designed to be operated by Darwinians. Right.
So this level is really like the catastrophe, right? This should have Darwinians.
That's right. It should only have Darwinians. So these probably all were Darwinians.
Right.
But they've been murdered by the virus.
Right.
And then instead of their souls escaping, so they can learn from the experience, they've been distorted into this evil computer virus.
Because the Darwinians were put to work in Sepulveda's evil Bitcoin mine, right? And they've revolted.
It's called the Pixel Mines, and they're mining raw polygons from the mountainside.
Brilliant.
That's why it's got such a sort of angled look to it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all flooding back to me now, just how fucking hard Darwinia is to explain.
Yeah.
Do you remember going around all the journalists in the UK in 2004, you know, and trying to say, so there's this virtual world, right, and there's this guy called Dr. Sepulveda who's a bit like Sir Clive Sinclair.
Yeah.
And their faces just like, we were just playing FIFA, you know?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Well, no, that's not true. Some were, but others got it. You know, that was the thing that was so good about it. Like when you try and really push the bound, you know, the classical wisdom, you know, my world is what's your elevator pitch, you know, what's your 30 seconds when you've got some, but that distills all creativity down, right, to something simple, bite-sized and understandable. But when you want to go the other way and push the boundary forward. It's like you want to know what Darwinia is about, play it or watch the developer commentary, right? Where we'll talk to you about it. Right?
We'll talk for 45 minutes, and we might actually finish explaining it. So Dr. Sepulveda has given us a bunch of computer programs, right? This is a simulated world. This is a Turing complete simulated world.
Right.
So we can run programs within this world.
Right.
But it does obey laws of physics, right? We can't just click a button and destroy all the viruses. Because Dr. Sepulveda wanted the world to have real, actual physics rules that were self-consistent, and he couldn't just wave his hand and make stuff happen. So we can bring up a list. This is a list of all the programs we can run.
Right.
And the top one on the list, the squad, is kind of your most direct, tip of the sword antivirus program. Right. So let's run one and create it. So this is our antivirus program. It's personified in the world as a bunch of dudes with machine guns.
I love these guys. They're like the Knights of Darwin. We had a huge poster, didn't we, of these guys looking absolutely badass.
Yeah. Also, it's the day. This is 2004 is pre-pixel shaders, and we were already doing weird stuff like this. Like, I didn't want them to look like crisp polygons. I wanted them to look pixelated and broken, as if they weren't really fully there. See what I mean?
I maybe it's because I'm reading The Hobbit to Will at the moment, but I keep going back to Lord of the Rings. The pixel mines, the spider reminds me of Shelob, right? These guys like fading in and out, are kind of Nazgul, sort of inspired. Yeah, I remember that.
There's a lot of that. I mean, Lord of the Rings was a definitive book for me. I read Lord of the Rings when I was 11, and it's one of the big influences for me.
But it's subtle, right? It's subtle. You would play other games and go, well, that's Lord of the Rings influence. But our Lord of the Rings, it's not the story, it's not the setting. It's something deeper, isn't it?
It doesn't personify as hobbits. You could kind of say the Darwinians are a bit hobbit-like, aren't they? Because they're sort of like these peaceful farmers, at the start of the game, forced into this much bigger conflict that they don't really understand.
So cannon fodder as well.
Right, yeah. So yes, the control system for these guys is pure cannon fodder, right? Left click to move these guys around like this, and whilst they're moving you can right click to fire their lasers, right? And I can move the camera around them with the usual WSD keys. Mm-hmm. So in other words, a control system that nobody had ever seen before.
Right.
Because apart from the few people that loved cannon fodder. And then whilst you're firing lasers you can tap the left button and throw grenades, which are kind of have a different sort of effect. So we were talking about these souls, right? So these are the corrupted souls from the Darwinians, and we can collect these up, and we should do, because they're very useful to us. Now, in order to do that, we have to run an engineer program. So here's our engineer, the most direct Tron reference of all, I think.
Yeah.
It is the what are they called in Tron?
I don't know what they're called.
Reckoners or something, I think. Recognizers. Yeah, they've got a name.
Recognizers? Yeah, they do something, don't they? Fly around the place.
So you can see there's some light area control stuff going on. Like you can only create these things near to yourself.
Right.
And they're programs. These are programs. This is our list of programs, and we terminate a program that we don't want anymore by pressing Control-C.
Of course we do.
Because Dr. Sepulveda has created this operating system, right, which runs on top of this world that the Darwinians live in. So you can see that they're now collecting up all of the souls of those viruses that we just killed. And when they're done with that, we can convert these souls back into the Darwinians that they were originally. Right. So we can start to make right what has gone wrong. Let's see. Here we go. So this guy brings them over this piece of equipment that we just captured.
And they're just doing that automatically.
Yeah, they run off.
The engineers. You're not controlling those. You just.
That's right.
Okay.
Which is a kind of an introversionism, isn't it? In hindsight, this idea that you're indirectly controlling these guys. They're more like a tactical unit, rather than the squaddies are directly controlled, but the engineers are not. So this building is called a hibernator or something.
Right.
And one at a time, it converts those captured souls back into Darwinians. Right? You can see them hanging out there.
Out they come.
Yeah. So your Darwinians, we can't control them directly, right? So we can't grab a hold of these Darwinians and say, go up here and man this mine.
Right.
because they have free will. Right? Dr. Sepulveda, when he designed this system, he thought that the idea that you could click on them and then give them a direct order and directly affect their brain like that would remove any possibility that they would ever really be sentient, right? Because they can't make their own decisions.
Right, that defeated the point, right?
Exactly.
If you could, you know.
So that is strictly not allowed. But what we can.
What do the Darwinians think about these squads flying about the place?
Well, they think that you're their saviour. Obviously,
They do.
They think that you're kind of angels, you know.
Right,
They know about Dr. Sepulveda. You know.
They do. Okay.
Part of the mythology of the game is that they have seen Dr. Sepulveda. Right? So every now and then his webcam broadcasts his picture into the world by accident.
Oh, he's such an egomaniac.
Yeah, but by accident. He never intends.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
By
So there's a mythical story in one of the later levels whereby he corrupts one of the textures of the world. I think it's the sky texture. He corrupts it with an image from his webcam, and his face is kind of plastered all over the sky, just for a second, just for the briefest of seconds, you know, and that's enough. Every Darwinian sees it, and every Darwinian just instantly knows, instinctively, that that is their God creator, you know, who's responsible for all of this.
You just pop the camera on the sky there, and
yeah,
you know, we've sort of seen it 100 times, but it is just
video game references in it right there.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It's how many things are coded in that. It's beautiful as well. What is it? Yeah. Sort of 3 or 4 layers of.
Yeah, it's 3 or 4 levels of Tetris shapes coming through and overlaying on top of each other. It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's like a whole mathematical pattern in its own right. It looks a bit like Conway's Game of Life, actually, playing out in a kind of slow motion.
It's not though, is it?
No, it's not.
Is Game of Life in Darwinia?
Yes, it's in one of the bootloaders.
Okay.
But that's another whole story.
Yeah, we'll chat about that.
Oh, yeah, so I was talking about these Darwinians then. So what we can do, though, is we can promote one of them to a leader. So one of the programs that we can run is called Officer. I can click on that, and then I can click on a Darwinian and promote him.
Sir, yes, sir.
Right, now he's now a controllable Darwinian, so we can give him orders, right, because he works for us now. And then he can give orders to the Darwinians. So by right-clicking on him, I can put him into follow mode, and you'll see that all those Darwinians suddenly snap into line and follow him in a fairly undisciplined, raggedy kind of way.
Yeah. This is kind of the Lemmings influence, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
You know, that you can't control the Darwinians, but the odd Darwinian you can control.
You have indirect control of them all, but it's not perfect. It's deliberately not a real-time strategy, perfect control game, because part of their charm is their kind of how crap they are at everything. You know?
Right, yeah.
And part of the process of them fighting off this virus with your help. So if I've got this officer selected, if I right click over here like this, he goes into like go-to mode, and he will just stand there saying go over there, right? And that he'll just leave that instruction running. And so you can start to ferry your Darwinians around the map using officers like that. And they'll do some fighting for us. So as part of the process of them fighting this virus, they're actually learning much faster than they were before. Okay? They're getting better in their own right. So the Darwinians themselves are improving as a program. Now I have to wonder. I'm trying to remember if I actually have upgraded these. Yes, I have. So these Darwinians have learnt from watching you guys, your antivirus squaddies, with their lasers, and so far they've learnt how to use lasers.
Okay.
They don't have the grenades yet. Where are my engineers? Let's bring some engineers back.
Yeah, because these are programs, they probably got eaten by a virus or something, but you don't lose anything, do you? You just run them again.
No, you never lose anything. You just run more of them. And so you slowly pick up control of the world, you know. And so you can see we've kind of cleared this zone. I mean, I'm taking it slowly. I mean, you can play this whole level in half an hour when you know what you're doing.
Right.
I'm just kind of explaining it.
Yeah.
I mean, our objective
absolutely.
is to kind of try and bring this piece of machinery back online. It's specified to us in the objectives list. I just haven't bothered explaining it to you. The Dr. Sepulveda explains it when you first come to this level. You know, this is a production facility. So this facility is like a bootstrap facility that's used to build everything else. So all of the pieces of equipment that you see in the world, all the physical things that aren't landscape, have been built here, right? But they're built out of things. So again, in keeping with this concept that the Darwinians can't just conjure up one of these machines out of nothing. It has to be constructed, and it's constructed out of materials, and those materials are mined from this cliff edge. This is where they've found that they can actually mine it. And so it's kind of like this whole ecosystem within a virtual world, you know. So if I get these guys to march forward to the same order point as that guy. Now this is one of the interesting contentious issues of Darwinia. I didn't know how to do pathfinding
Right.
at the time when we made this game. And to some extent, I still would struggle to write a pathfinding algorithm for such a three-dimensional world, even though it's kind of a 2D blanket disguised as a 3D world. So what I did instead was I just offloaded that problem to the player.
Right, okay.
And I just said that you can be responsible for making the Darwinians. Like, the Darwinians don't know how to route plan, you know? So they will follow orders to the letter. So if you tell them to walk into a lake, they'll walk into a lake and they'll start drowning. And then the rest of them will see that and stop.
But
it's the Lemmings influence again.
Yeah, exactly. But it also sits completely within the mythology of the world, isn't it? You know, that perfect synergy between the limitations of what we're doing in the story.
Yeah, that's right. I think Darwinia, in general, getting a little bit meta, was kind of the limits that we faced as a game company are what became the game. You know?
Right.
So the Darwinians were not. They were just the programmer art that I drew to represent a person. Originally, they were going to be squaddies. They were going to be soldiers in some sort of real-world game, and the landscape was going to be some sort of fractalized hillscape that you would fight a war on. Right? And I couldn't really draw very well, so I just got Photoshop and drew like the most basic person I could think of.
But I think it's our company logo now. It's
but
on
now
everything.
Now it's our brand.
You know, every game that you play has got a Darwinian on it. You know, which I think is because you just, you know, like you say, oh, I've just knocked this up in 5 minutes. Oh, by the way, mate, that's amazingly, brilliantly fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, and we would have had to pay $100,000 to Saatchi or whoever to come up with that. You know.
Yeah. Well, at the time it wasn't that. At the time it was just a bit of placeholder art. It wasn't very good. Yeah. So you can see, so the fighting's ended. The fighting's finished. There's a load of dead souls around, and the Darwinians kind of stand around and kind of have this little ritual of their own, you know, where they kind of sway from side to side, and you can see this guy's made a little soul kite. And they just kind of, it's part of their mythology is helping the souls make their way back to the soul repository.
I love that. This is the Game of Thrones burning of the bodies at the end, isn't it? The ritual at the end of the battle. Yeah. You know, to say goodbye to departed merit.
And those that have died have a long journey ahead of them. And if they don't make it back to the soul repository, then everything they've ever experienced will be lost. Yeah. And that's the real death. But they don't really know what death is, the Darwinians, because it's just like a learning experience for them. You know, they just
who does?
You know, who does? Well, that's right. It's very profound.
It's your Crystal meditation on death. I'd listen to that.
Well, I think that's what we are listening to, isn't it? Right, it's got a bit of that. So the level got a little bit harder there. Now that we've taken control of all this area, you'll see there's been a little bit of a viral outbreak in an area that we thought was clear. And you might notice that this egg just bounced in from where it wasn't welcome.
Right.
If we trace that back, you can see that on this other whole island, there are a couple of weird Triffid-like things over here. And they sort of wind up
They're not good, are they?
Every few minutes and toss a little egg over the hill.
Well, it's Easter at the moment, so I'm sure it's got something nice in it, right?
That's very true, yeah.
Oh, that one's gone in the...
Yeah, there's physics, you see.
Yeah.
What was it Kieran Gillen said? Real-time metaphysics.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how he described the game. I think that is like the best tagline I've ever heard. And no one would know what it meant. Yeah. But it really made me giggle.
Sums it up. Maybe that's what we should have said. The elevator pitch. Yeah. Real-time metaphysics.
Real-time metaphysics. I think people would have told us to take a hike. I mean, to be honest, a lot of people did when we were shopping Darwinia around.
That's right. Well, there was no indie.
Yeah, exactly. This is 2004. In fact, it was 2003 when we were making this.
That's right.
Even earlier.
I mean, there is a platform for this kind of thing now. You know, experimental gameplay and Nuevo Awards. You know, these are the. Just thinking, we were at GDC, so my mind is still there.
Indie generally. I mean, the idea of incredibly quirky, weird indie games from one kind of mad creator is quite a well-established and welcome thing now.
That's right.
But it was not in 2004. In fact, there wasn't Valve weren't even distributing games on the Steam platform in 2004 or 2005. You know, they had Half-Life.
Yeah.
And then by 2006, they'd expanded to one other game, and you know, so that there wasn't even that platform now that indies rely on. There was no Xbox Live Arcade.
Well, you know, interesting historical fact that Darwinia was the second non-Valve game on Steam.
Yeah, that's right, and thank God, because it, you know, even then we could see the power of Valve's system for reaching an audience, couldn't we? That we could never achieve, because we were selling CDs of this game, and we were selling it as a digital download on our website. And I'm pretty sure we were running like credit card processing software that Tom had written in his spare time, weren't we? It was like absolute Wild West of internet video game design.
Yeah, and distribution. You know, trailblazing. You know, back in the day.
Yeah. So I think that's a good demonstration of that level. Yeah. Yeah. So we were talking about bootloaders. So every time you run the game, you get a random bootloader from a collection.
Oh, I'm so pleased this one was the one
this one, of all the ones that could have shown up. This one's quite notorious, actually.
Yeah. This got us in trouble.
People that are not from the Amiga, people that didn't own an Amiga and didn't live in the UK and weren't roughly age 14 when the Amiga was prominent, probably have no fucking clue what they're looking at, do they?
Yeah.
But in those glory days of the Amiga, when we couldn't afford to buy games, there was a fairly rampant piracy market, wasn't there?
There was.
At school.
There was.
And piracy, so pirate copies of every major game that came out, including Cannon Fodder and Syndicate and Lemmings and all the games that we couldn't afford, would flow out somehow. They would be cracked by a hacking group, and then they would be copied over and over again by school kids. We would just copy disc after disc after disc. And that was viral video game distribution back in 1994.
Yeah.
And this is what was at the start of every game you ever played. It was a graphical demo made by the people who are responsible for hacking the game and removing the copy protection, because even then there was anti-piracy software. And it was always some mad graphics tech demo, wasn't it?
It was the... I mean, you say hacking group, I don't know. I reckon it's one or two people. You know, hacking group, I think, gives it more cachet than it was. But they would show off their skill by sort of, you know, stamping their mark on the game that they'd cracked, right?
Yeah.
Look, this is how good I am. And we put the bootloaders in as a nod to, you know, well that was a particular.
That's the most direct example.
Yes.
And I think, and we actually had people. I think we had someone from Valve, didn't we, who was just playtesting the game the day before launch, and just sent an urgent email.
Yeah.
The build you sent us has been compromised. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
It's got some sort of virus in that only reveals itself sometimes, you know.
And now, in contracts now, there's things that say you have to tell us about all the Easter eggs in your game.
That's
right.
But
in those days, there wasn't. And it's like, no, calm down. It hasn't been hacked. It's fine. We put it in there. It's a nod to this ancient. And then like one person in the room would go, guys, that's incredible. Well done. And everyone else would be going, what?
Well, we know what this one's from.
No, this is a good one as well. Let's not tell anybody. I mean, I'm sure people will know.
Obvious.
Well, let's tell them, I mean,
any old tape-based computer would have looked like this and sounded like this, because they all use the same tech.
Yeah.
What I get, what to me is amazing, like looking back in hindsight, is that this is not a simulated graphical effect. I mean, it is, but what I mean by that is that this is a genuine WAV of a Spectrum game. Truncated, so it's not usable, but it's kind of the first 30 seconds of a tape recording from a game. And
are you going to say what game it is?
No, and the graphical effects around the edge are from us looking at the Spectrum hardware manual, interpreting how those graphical effects were made, because it's all based on the data coming in. Right? So it's from the fact that your television is a 50 scanline system, right? And so as you're reading data in from a tape, you just put colours around the border of the screen. It's just direct interpretation of the byte stream coming off the tape.
Yeah.
So that'd be really interesting tech, you know. So this bootloader's got a whole like scanline simulator running.
Yeah.
That's interpreting the sound data.
You were always as crazy as you always were. So there's a whole bunch of bootloaders in there that we should have put a new one in actually.
Could have added another one, yeah.
You know,
I don't know. I mean, that's part of the interesting conversation generally about. Oh, there's another one. Tell what that came from.
I have no idea where that came from.
There's a whole kind of question about what does it mean to re-release a game, or a film or something. How much meddling should be done. And I've kind of taken a leaf out of what George Lucas did wrong. And so to me, meddling with the game is actually a really bad idea. And so we haven't added tons of new content, we haven't added tons of new effects, we haven't actually changed anything in terms of the game itself, because the game itself is something that I think we wanted to preserve and present exactly as it was.
So what have we done then for Darwinia's?
What we have done is that, the thing is that Darwinia was written between 2002 and 2004, and it was written in OpenGL 1, and its sound system was written by us, and things have moved on technologically. So behind the scenes, the entire graphics engine has been ripped out and replaced with the modern graphics APIs that exist now, which is the latest version of OpenGL, Vulkan, DirectX, and Metal. And so the game will actually pick whichever back-end engine is the best suited for your platform, depending on whether you're running it on PC or Mac or what system you have installed. And on the Mac, it'll run natively on Apple Silicon if you have it. If you've got one of the swanky new MacBooks, if you've got one of the older Intel ones, it'll run natively on that. And so as a result of all that, it runs at thousands of frames per second now. We've just got rid of all the old limits that were there on the game. It'll run at whatever resolution you're running. Like a lot of people now run at 4K resolution permanently, So the game will happily now run at 4K resolution. The user interface scales, so it's not like a tiny little box like it would have been previously.
Right, yeah.
And as a result of all that, it kind of looks and performs the best it ever has. I think there's always been a bit of a worry for us that Darwinia would stop working.
Yes, well, that's the same with all games, right?
Yeah.
That the game, I think our games are timeless in a certain way, and keeping them up to date in terms of running on the latest systems is important, but we don't need to go in and tweak them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think stuff like Apple have said, haven't they, that OpenGL is now deprecated.
Yeah.
Which to me is like one of the most brazen bullshit things for a company to say. It's like, you didn't invent OpenGL, you can't deprecate it. And it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine. And so it just kind of, it's one of the things that bothers me, that it's like this idea that one day Darwinia might not work anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Because somebody at Apple just decides, nobody uses OpenGL anymore. And that's it. And we see that happening on the platforms that we can't control, like the mobile platforms and stuff. We have had games on iOS, for example, that just stopped working one day, and that's difficult to deal with. So I guess this isn't an effort on our part, isn't it, to make sure that doesn't happen? Yeah,
exactly. Darwinian might stop working one day. I hope not. But today is not that day.
Today is not that day. We are well future-proofed now. But I think that my hope as well is that, I honestly think, when we were talking about this, I honestly think that there is a lot of people out there that love quirky indie video games and are probably quite young and don't even know Darwinia exists, because it came out in a time before quirky indie video games were a thing. And they've just never heard of it because it's not a game that we really promote or push anymore.
Other than this massive birthday push.
Other than now, and that's why I think, and that's why we've decided to do it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's Darwinia's turn.
Yeah.
It's been so long, and it's their 10,000th anniversary. How often does your 10,000th anniversary come around?
Not often enough.
Not often enough.
And so it is available on Steam, GOG, directly from us, and also as part of Microsoft's Xbox backwards compat program, so you can get it on all of those platforms. So if you've not played it, then pick it up, and if you have played it, well, why don't you return to it? I think you'll have a pleasant surprise. So happy 10,000th anniversary, Darwinia.